Hello, I'm Storm Knight, and this is the CISL seminar series. And anyway, I am pleased to present Shelley Knuth and Craig Earley. I wound up working part-time in the CURC on loan about 3 years ago for about 6 months. And I had a wonderful time with them and got to learn a lot about the way they do things. And they are a very lovely group. And so please welcome Shelley Knuth and Craig Earley. Shelley will be speaking first, and feel free to interrupt with questions as you feel fit.
Hi, I'm Shelley Knuth. I'm the Director of Research Computing at University of Colorado. So I'll talk a bit, and then Craig's going to jump in. We decided that we wanted to talk about a cohort that we have that's really interesting, but we also want to just share a little bit about what we're doing over in research computing. And okay. Our mission in research computing is probably very similar to other research computing groups, which is that we are here to help researchers be the most competitive that they can be in their respective disciplines. So we want to provide the computational infrastructure for them to succeed and do the best they can in their disciplines. And so that means a whole variety of infrastructure that we're providing, and we've expanded quite a bit in the last 4 years, I'd say, to accommodate some of the needs. We do a 5-year strategic plan. We just started year 4 of our current one. And in that strategic plan, we have 6 goals that we're looking at. These include infrastructure, user support, data management and storage, secure research data, education, and leadership. And so what we do every year is we get together as a leadership team in research computing. We talk about how we want to, like, sub-goals to achieve the large goals that are in the strategic plan. Then our team leads work with their individual teams to finesse that, and then we all come to an agreement on what we want the next year to look like. And you're welcome to see our entire plan if you want to copy that link, or you can go to colorado.edu/RC, and it's at the very bottom of the page. When we first started the strategic plan, we got together several groups around campus that included our users, but it also included institute directors and campus leaders and students and all kinds of folks. And it really provided us with a good opportunity to look at what campus wanted from us for the next 5 years. And we're going to have to do that again next year. So and I just recently earlier this week, gave a talk on sort of the state of research computing and where we're at. So I begged, borrowed, and stealed some of my own slides for this, but I want to showcase some of the highlights that we've had over the last year. And our strategic plan year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So this is all pretty recent. So our team is 29 people in research computing. We have an additional 4 who are working formally with our team or pretty closely, but they might be in other groups. And we currently have 2 vacant positions. One of them is, we just put a call out and the call closed, and the other one we're working on a plan for moving forward. Fun fact, your CISL director, Thomas Hauser, used to be the director of research computing, and so he was my boss. And when he was director, I think we had about 11 people. So and that was 4 years ago. So we've grown a lot, and this growth of 29 people happened in about the first year. So things kind of have exploded on our team, which is good. It's been challenge to manage, but I really feel like we're at the point now where we're really in a rhythm and we're doing a great job. So some of the other things that we're doing, we've grown our system, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We've received a new grant and 2 supplements to current grants. We have a strong participation in the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource Pilot. So we'll talk a bit about that. We are supporting confidential data for campus, and Craig is going to talk about the cohort here in a few minutes. And we are supporting roughly $136 million in research grants, both at CU Boulder and beyond, although actually that number is just specific to CU Boulder. So let's dive in. We offer a variety of different infrastructure sources for our researchers, depending on what their needs are. Our on-prem computing is Alpine primarily. That's our supercomputer. We have a data center on campus. This is a photo of it, although I believe that is technically the previous system, but they all look the same. And then we have Blanca, which is our condo model. We also have large-scale data storage through the PETA library. And recently we moved into secure research between something we're calling the Preserve, which supports data that needs certification through CMMC. And then very recently, last month, we set up a landing zone through AWS to store confidential data, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then we also provide researchers the opportunity to do research through the cloud. And this is something that's sort of new for our group, at least within the last few years, and it's been really interesting as we've proceeded. So Alpine, so this is our 3rd generation system in research computing, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this one and the previous ones. Our first system was Janus, and then our second system was Summit, and then now we have Alpine. And starting with Summit and then continuing into Alpine, it's really been a shared cluster. And so we moved to a different funding model when we set up Alpine, and there was much more institutional support provided. But that also meant that our partners may have lost access to the system. So we were able to secure RMAC members to have access, and I'll talk about what RMAC is in a second, but through a grant that we got where we're partnering with CU Denver, the University of Northern Colorado, Colorado Mesa, and New Mexico Tech. And but then we also have partnerships with Colorado State and Anschutz Medical Campus. And what's happened with CSU and Anschutz is that they have decided that it was more cost effective for them to utilize our data center and put equipment there. And so they've purchased hardware. It's in our data center. Our team manages it, and they have support facilitators that help the folks on their campus make sure that they know how to use it. And then the RMAC portion, which is the consortium in the region, we provide, it's a little bit of a complicated math, but roughly about 10% of our system goes to members of the RMAC consortium, and then I'll talk about that in a minute. We have 389 compute nodes, over 22,000 cores, 60 GPUs, and 22 high mem nodes with a 1.9 petabyte GPFS scratch file system. And we grew this year, particularly since we got the CC Star grant that brought the nodes for RMAC. We're supporting about 1,779 users total, and just over 1,000 of those are from CU Boulder, and that has been an increase of 28% for the total user base and 21% just for CU Boulder just since last year. We're supporting 148 million core hours, 95 million for CU Boulder specifically, and that's a total increase of 25%. And then for just CU, it's an increase of 4%. And then again, we're supporting over 136 million in research grants, which is an increase of about 35% from last year. Although that number, the growth number, the number itself, I'm fairly confident in. The growth number, take a little bit with a grain of salt because we were perfecting our collection system last year, so we may have underestimated. Who are we supporting? And this is for Alpine. We are supporting a variety of folks across campus. So this is just looking at the College of Arts and Sciences. Primarily, we're supporting atmospheric and oceanic sciences, so woohoo, and physics folks, and ecology and evolutionary biology. So, and we do have some people who start out using our system at CU before they transition to NCAR, so we have some familiarity with what they're doing for you all. On our, for our College of Engineering and Applied Science, we're hitting quite a bit of the engineering disciplines, in particular computer science and aerospace engineering, and but we run the gamut. And one other thing I wanted to point out on the previous slide too is that, I mentioned we hit atmospheric and oceanic sciences and physics primarily, but you'll see too that we have users from a lot of different departments that perhaps are folks that you wouldn't necessarily associate with the use of a high-performance computing system. So you can see we have folks in anthropology, English, economics, humanities, integrative physiology, linguistics. So we do have a pretty broad scope of folks who utilize our system. There's some other colleges and programs that don't necessarily fit into the certain departments. So we have our College of Media, Communication, and Information, our School of Business, and then folks who are on the system that aren't necessarily associated with department. And then at CU, we also have 12 institutes that focus on different areas. And so we have a broad reach there. CIRES is, and I'm sure several of you know CIRES, but CIRES is the, and I won't remember the acronym, but they're the folks that work closely in atmospheric science, but across a whole bunch of other fields as well. And then LASP, which is the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space something. And they do quite a bit with us as well. But then again, we still have, we have behavioral genetics and, all the biofrontiers. We have different groups of folks that we are reaching, even the wellness team. So if we look at our secure research data platform, this is something that's been pretty new. We were very careful to not deal with secure data prior to about 3-4 years ago, I'd say. But it became obvious that this was something that we really needed to provide to our researchers on campus. And we're doing that through 2 different methods primarily right now. The first is something that we're calling the Preserve. And this is an environment for researchers who have projects that require the use of highly confidential data, specifically designed around the Cybersecurity Maturation Model Certification, or CMMC. If any of you are familiar with that, you know that's basically, these are to ensure that we're going to get contracts from the Department of Defense moving forward, because some of those have certain clauses in them that require special security around their data. And if the campus does not have a place to put data for these folks, then the DoD will not award us the grants. So this is something we've been building out. The certification process has always been a bit of a moving target in terms of when this is going to become a higher concern, but the tea leaves say, and I think it's more than tea leaves at this point, that this is the CMMC requirement is going to start coming up in contracts in January. So that means that this is a thing that we're going to have to start working with folks on when, people are submitting their proposals and getting awarded after January. We also are working quite a bit to secure data that doesn't necessarily fall under CMMC, but falls under Controlled Unclassified Information, or CUI. and that's a much broader scope. It can comprise some of the CMMC data, but it doesn't always require kind of the heavy hammer that is required for CMMC. But nonetheless, we have several folks that are dealing with CUI data. We don't deal with HIPAA or those kinds of data. It's a thing we've talked about, and every once in a while we bring it back up again, but it's not a place that we've dove into yet. We also, I mentioned this earlier, but we developed a landing zone in AWS that supports data that requires compliance with CU Boulder's confidential status. And that status is very specific to CU Boulder. It's even different across the 4 CU campuses. But there are folks that have a need for basically storing data that's somewhere between totally open and CUI. And so we have this landing zone in AWS that, again, just last month we got it running. And then Alpine, we are exploring what it would mean to make components of Alpine secure. It's a fine line to walk here because we want to make sure that we're not making a system that needs to have open data so secure that nobody can use it. But this is a thing that's starting to become a reality in terms of HPC systems across the community. And so we've looked into what we would need to do for it. We think that we could probably maintain some of the controls, not quite 171, but we're hoping to get to that confidential status. And it's something that we're looking at moving into the next strategic plan year. So on the preserve, because again, the AWS LZA is just started last month, and the Alpine, we haven't done anything yet with secure data. But so if we're just looking at the preserve and who we're supporting, right now we're supporting about 32 researchers on the system, 59 total, and that's up from about 25% in last year. And compared to Alpine, of course, this is a smaller group, but it's to be expected. Besides the fact that it's specialized, researchers aren't necessarily going to do the thing until they're required to do the thing, and they are not yet required to do the thing. So, we're already seeing, even within the last week or two, as certain requirements are coming from NIH, an uptick in people that are really interested in working with us. But primarily right now, we're working with aerospace, LASP, and mechanical engineering. This project's supporting roughly $1.1 million annually in research grants. And the way that the preserve is designed, and again, this is to meet the CMMC requirements. So we have one component that's for Microsoft Gov 365, and there's some folks that when they have secure data that's labeled as CUI or what have you, they have to have a secure way to email either that data or email folks about sensitive information. They need to have a place where they can write documents that may contain that sensitive information or send Teams messages back and forth. And so that's part of what we have set up in the preserve, and that's a lot of what it's used for right now. So the email sent and received metrics you see there are relevant because that's what a lot of researchers are using right now. And I'm sure you all went through that period. I think it was a few months ago where we were like every email from NSF was getting labeled as CUI, and I'm not quite sure what the plan was there, but people get those, and they're things that you really need to think about what you're doing with it. And then the other part of the preserve is for computation, and we have an Azure instance where folks can spin up some cycles if they need to do heavier computation. As I said, we're also supporting the cloud, and this is for those computing needs that don't really fit on an HPC or HTC high throughput computing infrastructure. So we're talking about things like long-running jobs, website applications, things like that. And these are requests that we've gotten for a very long time, and we weren't necessarily able to support. But now with the cloud being a part, we are able to do that. And so this is through something called the Cloud Foundation Service. Basically what we are doing is enabling researchers to better use the cloud more efficiently and effectively and cost effectively by providing a centralized resource for them to work through. So we set up centralized billing, we get a discount as part of the university, and researchers can work on what they need to in the cloud and have some level of security around not just the containers and whatnot being secure, but also with trying to minimize overspend and having all of these enclaves of folks trying to figure out how to run things in the cloud and maybe struggling with that a bit. We support AWS, Azure, and very recently Google Cloud Platform. We did have a grant that had a hybrid cloud. It was called Cumulus. This was about 5 years ago. Thomas was the PI on that grant. And the infrastructure is going out of warranty, so that particular piece is retiring at this point. And we've decided not to update to have a new system that's partly on-prem. So with the cloud, we're supporting users, again, in CIRES, which is that environmental institute, computer science, the Institute of Behavioral Studies, and psychology. And we're supporting about 38 projects and just over $20 million in research grants. Again, this Cloud Foundations has been going on at CU for, I'm not quite sure, maybe 7 years or so. They've only been in research computing for the last 4, and I think that there's been a lot of opportunity for growth there as they were more connected to the research entity on campus. Their notable accomplishments in the past year, we set up the landing zone. They added Google Cloud as a service. We've been seeking status as a foundational service, which is just to say that at CU, if you're labeled as a foundational service, there's certain benefits that come to that in terms of having continuous funding and whatnot, rather than having to, ask for it every single year. And then we've also started up a new Cloud 101 training to help folks who are interested in getting involved with the cloud. Our PETA library service, so we have, again, that large-scale data storage. We have archive and active. So these are 2 different components where our active storage is for folks who want to compute against that data and make sure that it's more readily available. Archive is where they might need, say, a backup or someplace to stick the data. Maybe they're not using it anymore, and they don't need to access it quite as frequently. We used to have our archive data on tape, but we've upgraded that recently as tape, interestingly enough, got more and more expensive. And we have new backup options, and we're working with NCAR actually on this for an offsite backup, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then our Blanca condo cluster, again, faculty can purchase hardware, we manage it in our data center, and it removes the opportunity for folks to stick those servers under their desk and do all kinds of fun things with unmanaged hardware. PETA Library has 7 petabytes of allocated storage, almost 9 with backups, and then just for CU, it's 5 and 6.6. We work quite closely with our medical campus. They utilize a lot of our storage options for their data. We've had 18 new Blanca orders provisioned in June. People really get excited about buying into the cluster, and it's a thing that we've worked on bringing awareness to over the years, and we're finally starting to get some traction there. One thing that, and then we had the hardware refresh where we replaced some hardware that was losing support and had to rebuild some of the nodes and install new OSs. We now can say that we have offsite data recovery, and that's through a collaboration we have with NCAR. There's a a broader collaboration than just us and the folks here. It includes people in the libraries and on both ends, but we're part of that collaboration, and so we've been able to, for folks who want it, provide that offsite backup so that if something does happen in our data center, like a flood or a fire, not that any of those things would happen here, there's a second location for the data. Now, people have to opt into this, so not everybody has, but we frequently warn them about their data being just in one spot so that they know that this is available. All this infrastructure is only as good as if people know how to use it. So we have a user support team that helps make sure that our researchers are able to use the system. And they've done some updating with the trainings platform recently. They created these 5 different options for trainings, as you can see there, and they kind of go from short 30-minute trainings up all the way to a course. We have one micro-credentialed course right now that you're able to take. And just some of the things that they've taught this year were AlphaFold 2, our generative AI, Foundations of HPC, that's the micro-credentialed course. And there's a lot more. We also do quite a bit more trainings through a collaboration we have with the Center for Research Data and Digital Scholarship, which is a partnership we have with the libraries on campus. Our interactions, which we define as one-on-one consultations, or office hours, which we hold 2 days a week. We had about 500 of those in the last year. We get about 263 tickets a month that we manage. And one big thing for the team is they grew their cloud skill set as we were getting more and more researchers that were using the cloud through us. We needed to make sure that our support team was up to date on those topics, and being sort of focused on HPC, it's definitely a growth area for them. Then we have some grants, yes, this very lovely photo of I at supercomputing last year. So we have 2 grants. We had a third grant, and that one just ended recently. But the primary one that we have is NSF Access. This is the follow-on to Exceed. For those of you familiar, Access, if you're not familiar, supports users and resources across some of the big supercomputing centers in the country, so like Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center and San Diego. You all have a person here, Dave Hart, who also is part of the Access team, although not specifically on my project, but we all work pretty closely together. So my team leads the support component. So we are making sure that the user experience across the board is fairly, is as good as it can be. And we have to work closely with the resource providers and the user support teams on at those specific institutions to work on that. Then we also have the CC Star grant I mentioned. This brought some of the cycles to Alpine for the RMAC users. And I actually am not sure that I have a slide on RMAC, so let me talk about that for a second. I think I pulled that slide out. So I mentioned RMAC a couple of times. RMAC is the Rocky Mountain Advanced Computing Consortium. Some of you may have been to the symposium we have. It's usually in Boulder in May. But RMAC itself is about 38 institutions across 10 states. And some of those states include EPSCoR jurisdictions. We have non-R1s, we have R1s, we have community colleges. We just got our first community college within the last 2 months. So we have a wide diversity of institutions and members. And we run the consortium at CU, and CAR is a member. And we do all kinds of things. We do trainings. We have several committees that are meeting on a regular basis. And one of the big things, though, is that we provide a portion of are clustered to folks at RMAC institutions who maybe don't have their own on-prem system, and this is the only access that they would have. So one other thing I wanted to talk about was our involvement in NAIR. And again, this is the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource Pilot. You can say that 3 times fast and see if you can do it. NAIR is something that came from an executive order from President Biden. And this program connects U.S. researchers and educators to computational data and training resources across the country. And it's a pretty high-profile project where a lot of federal agencies are collaborating with each other, which in and of itself is probably a bit of a unique situation. But then on top of it, they're also collaborating with industry partners, and all of these folks are providing resources to the NAIR. And this allows researchers to then apply to use these resources to do AI research. And really the pilot is helping to bridge the gap for researchers who lack access to AI. And they want to ensure that the resources and tools are equitably accessible. There was a task force, I want to say 2 years ago, that was formed to see how we could make sure that we being the United States, were doing a good job at harnessing what's going on with AI, making sure that we're competitive in the national landscape, and that we can do what we can to stay at that forefront. And the task force recommended the pilot, and also recommended that a full implementation would probably be something like $2.6 billion that would need to be appropriated by Congress. It actually has pretty good bipartisan support. I've been to DC, I've talked to folks on the Hill. They all know what NAIR is. It's kind of interesting that how much traction this has. And it's been really, really pretty neat to be involved in. And Dave Hart here at NCAR is also involved as well through NAIR and his role in access. Again, there's some open calls where researchers can get access to some of the premier AI resources in the country, whether it's computational infrastructure, tools, models, or software, data sets, or training and educational resources. And we're really trying to get everybody across the board, whatever skill set you have, to be involved. So we have people who have been doing AI for 10 years, and we have people who are just learning what AI is. And NAIR wants to bring all of these folks together as one. Our role in NAIR, we've been asked to lead the user experience working group. And that number is actually wrong. It's about 175 projects. I think there's about 220 users, so I apologize for that. And so what we're trying to do is, through this pilot, because we want to make sure that we can move to the implementation phase, right? So right now we're just testing a bunch of things, and then we want to make sure that the user experience is solid, because I think that's going to be a really important component of whether or not this pilot is successful, and we can move toward a bigger project. So what we try to do is look at the entire landscape and say, what is the user experience like? What recommendations do we have to best meet the needs of users? And there's a lot of different things we're doing there. Again, the resource providers have user support teams on their location that do a lot of that boots on the ground work. But we're doing things like we're surveying all of the researchers. We're trying to figure out if, when people get allocations, what kind of challenges they're facing to using them, or if they're not using them, why is that? We're trying to make sure that our processes are sound and that they're making the best case for end users. We talked quite a bit to the resource providers right when this was starting up to figure out what they need, and we have a captive group of folks who are awarded through another NSF solicitation program that has them spending 20% of their time on the Access project. So we're routing them to do things like heavy-duty one-on-one support for NAIR folks, and office hours and things like that. So we're really just trying to make sure, I mean, any of you who are in user support know that, making sure that that user experience is solid is important. And a lot of times that requires a lot of one-on-one time. And we're doing our best to throw all the people that we have at it. We are also doing some trainings and webinars. So we just did 2 AI showcases within the last 2 weeks. These were folks that are doing research in AI, and they came to chat about it and how they were involved in there. We're also planning to do an upcoming workshop on AI. The details of this I'm still working out, but will be worked out very soon. But most likely this is going to be held in Denver in spring, probably early April or late March. And what we want to do with this is, twofold. We want to make sure that folks that have projects are getting that one-on-one help that they need. But we also, for the democratization component, we want to have a section for folks who are really interested in, what is AI? How do I prepare a data set if I want to use AI? What tools do I need to use? What kinds of things do I need to generally be aware of, and then get them actually running some kind of AI workflow before they walk out the door. We put out a survey to find out what people wanted. We got 400 responses, which if you've ever put out a survey, you're aware that that's kind of unusual. And that was just from the survey. We got a lot of other responses from different places. So, and then the AI showcases, there were 450 people signed up for that. So this has a lot of traction. There's a lot of movement there.
So just a quick question, is then kind of sign up for this? And just as a side note, we're also contributing, I think, our data sets to NAIR. So,
okay, great.
But so, yeah, definitely interested in getting involved. So
yeah, so if you go to www.nairpilot.org, there's a place, I think it's at the bottom of the webpage, where you can sign up to join an email list and get updated on all kinds of events and news and things. But the get involved is really if you have a project that you want to work on through the NAIR. Okay, the shades are coming down in the room, and it's interesting. So. If you have a project, there's at the top of that webpage, there's a place where you can go for the open calls, and either there's an educational call and actually I think I have this on the next slide. No, I don't.
I think actually one of my teams has an allocation as part of the NAIR pilot. So.
Yeah, so I mean that's really a good way to get involved is applying for those calls, and then if you get awarded the resources, then you're part of the NAIR pilot. But if you're not quite sure where you want to go with that and just want to be part of the email list, you can join that as well. Okay. Diversity and inclusion is a big thing for us. It's part of everything we do in our team. And there's a few things specifically, though, that I wanted to call out. One of them is the RMAC student cohort, which Craig is going to talk about in a second. So one thing we did that has been really interesting over the last year was we did interviews with our RMAC partners and then users in Access. And we wanted to know, what is it that would bring you to high performance computing or research computing and data in general? What is it that you're looking for? And because we engaged RMAC, because we engaged Access, and then we also did some feedback forums, and we were very particular about who we chose for that. We made sure we chose folks from R1s, from non-R1s, from minority schools, from HBCUs, from all over the place, and folks who were using the systems, folks that had never heard of Access before. And so we got a lot of really interesting feedback about this. And the two things that primarily came up, one of them were workforce development. So people want to know how to build their skill sets. And another one was education. A lot of people, particularly at the non-R1s, aren't necessarily heavily engaged in research. Their primary focus is on teaching. So what they would love to know is, how can they do things like contribute to their coursework through Jupyter Notebooks or what have you. You'll notice that research didn't come up in those first two things. So that's very interesting, but research is obviously a component of this. And there's much more that we learned from this. We actually have a paper that we published on it last year. One other thing that we're doing is we have something called the CSEP, and I don't remember what that acronym stands for, so I apologize. It's a nested acronym too, that much I know, so I won't have no chance of remembering it. But what the CSEP program is if a person contributes to the Access ecosystem, and that means a ton of things. They could sit on one of our committees, they could provide a training, they could produce some documentation, they could ask or answer some questions on our Q&A forum. And if they do that, we will provide them with a travel grant to go to a university, to a conference. And what's really cool about this is that it gets people, first of all, it gets people involved in Access from a wider standpoint than just, those of us who are living and breathing Access. But it also provides different perspectives. When you have documentation that's being written by different folks, you get a lot of, you get it from different perspectives. And we've been, really happy about this program. We've had 178 applications that have been awarded across 60 institutions, and 11 of those are minority serving. And we're 2.5 years into Access, and this program, it took a little bit to get it up and running. So it's been about 1.5 years. So it's a pretty popular program. We've also been hosting workshops that are dealing with workforce development and paying for the travel for folks to attend. For the AI workshop I just mentioned, we'll be doing the same thing, paying for people to attend, because again, we want to get that wide variety of folks. And then we have the RMAC DEI Coalition. We've had NCAR folks participate in that. Any of you are welcome to join. We meet every 2 weeks on Wednesday at 10, and I believe this is the off week. So, and you can always contact me if you want to be involved, but we're talking about what we want to do across RMAC to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're planning on submitting some proposals to deal with this. We're talking about things like HPC in a box. There's all kinds of stuff that we're talking about there, and I invite you to join. Okay, so Craig is going to jump in and talk about the student cohort.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm excited to share the activities that we've been doing with the RMAC student cohort. Shelley introduced the high-level information at the beginning and in a couple other slides. This is an NSF CC STAR grant. It was an opportunity for undergraduate and graduate students to learn about high-performance computing system administration by learning from and shadowing the RC staff, particularly on the system administration side, with the target being that workforce development component that Shelley talked about previously. I think this feeds directly into the efforts to promote that. We have had a total of 17 participants, largely undergraduate students. We may have a couple of graduate students at this point, but all from RMAC member institutions. So those 30-odd institutions spread across the Rocky Mountain region. We had a few drawn from the contributors who worked on developing the CC STAR grant and were members who were co-PIs on the grant, as well as some drawn from the broader RMAC environment who may not have been named on the grant, but who were members of the institutions and wanted to add people from throughout those. CU Boulder as well is included here. 8 different institutions, 17 total students. We have had a couple of on-site in-person experiences, which is going to be kind of the bulk of what I'll talk about in the upcoming slides. And we additionally had an informal meetup at the RMAC Symposium. And at the very end, I'll share kind of what the next steps are going to look like for the student cohort. This did come along with, and this is important for what's coming up next, an expansion of the Scratch file system on Alpine, as well as of compute nodes, so standard CPU nodes, and a few new high memory nodes, which are rolling out and making available through the sharing system to the members of the RMAC consortium. It's a really good collaborative effort that's expanding resources, and we're trying to have the students as involved as possible in rolling all of those things out. So we'll get into some of that here. Our first in-person experience was in January of 2024. It was a one-week experience on site. The great sort of thrust of the effort was to remove the old Summit cluster, which was an RMAC-funded supercomputer that preceded Alpine, from CU Boulder's HPCF data center. The picture earlier on that Shelley mentioned was from a previous system. That's the system. It was in, for those of you who have not been at the high performance computing facility, which is the data center that houses the supercomputer, we have several different rows of cabinets, and it was in the southernmost set, and it constituted essentially a whole half of the available space and power within the data center. They worked together to kind of bring that out, and this was to get the experience of working with the hardware. This also was the culmination of a remote experience that kind of fed into all of this. From the time of the application process, which I believe we started in or around September, for the grant that I think officially kicked in October. Am I getting that? Yes, Shelley's nodding. We got people brought in, get accounts in the system, and begin teaching vocabulary. We drew the students from groups who were doing research, not pre-existing commitments to doing system administration as a career. There are people in this photograph who are mathematics students, people who study the atmospheric sciences, physicists. We do have certainly some computer scientists who are interested in participation as well. And by kind of drawing on all of this, we're trying to bring in people who may not have seen an opportunity before to do this, but who have an interest and think that this could be a good, viable career direction for them to take. And I know we have some of the students from this group who are currently applying for roles in HPC fields currently. And so it's exciting in that respect. The other nice thing about this whole program, when we got it started this time around, but as a continuing theme for kind of throughout, is these students have been very open to sort of running some experiments with us and doing to kind of prototyping of, is this a good way to teach people to learn to build and analyze a supercomputing cluster? Is this a good way of instructing on building and testing software? So they've been instrumental in kind of building up what we think could be not quite a curriculum, but a program that we could compile into a way that could then be applied in other environments and become a shared and benefit for RMAC and presumably for other folks who have an interest. So that all culminated here, week on site, data center experience, and the experience of kind of sitting in the room doing some development on rolling out the compute nodes that had arrived at that time. And so very exciting moment. We ran for that for a week in January, dispersed, short break, and then resumed the remote sessions and kind of kept up the teaching of the students over the course of the next academic term. Got together on a more informal basis at the RMAC Symposium. This was, I believe, the first time that Shelley got the chance to meet a chunk of the students, if I'm remembering this right. These were, I think, largely people who are from kind of the northern Colorado area. I think one of these is a CSU student. Bodie in there, if you're at NCAR, works here. And so there's some of these faces may be familiar. Gathered to meet, met with RC staff, met with the director, met with members of the RMAC institutions. I think that was a really good experience for kind of a sort of social and professional networking opportunity, as well as to kind of get a sense of what people in the region are talking about. That's something we've tried to do throughout the process as well, is give a vocabulary and a way of understanding and kind of navigating this field, because it is its own particular niche, and it has its own particular bits of knowledge that people should have, and a particular kind of networking environments that is good social, not technical networking environments. that is good to learn in addition to the technical skills. This had some new and returning members here. And then we cycled into our most recent in-person experience in August, so a couple months later. A couple of returning members and a couple of new members. Another 1 week on site, and this one included a data center component. You'll see them in here, and they did some work there. But the big focus of this one was to get the students the chance to meet and interact with CU research computing staff. And that included meeting with Shelley. It also included meeting with folks from our user support team, other system administrators. A lot of the direct interaction has been with me and with one of our other user support folks, but we had the opportunity to meet with some of the established professionals within the field and hear about what the day-to-day life is like, what it is that you might be doing if you were to get into this field professionally, what kind of excites people. And they kind of got the chance to go and just spend the day with research computing staff. I think we got very favorable reception from that. I think they learned quite a bit from it. And I think our staff really enjoyed it. I got a lot of very favorable response from members of research computing who got the chance to do these kind of sit-down conversations. User support, data center, and system administration were all involved, and this is where we rolled out some of the compute nodes for Alpine to go into RMAC. This is most of the members. There was one person who ended up needing to do remote, and I think we did as reasonable a job as we could accommodating it, but the in-person component I think really counted for a lot. And so as we're looking at the future work that we're doing, here in late 2024, we'll get an announcement and recruiting message out. The format is going to be slightly different this time around. We've kind of done this experimenting and this prototyping with the different kind of what we can do remotely, what kind of experiences they have benefited from in person. We're going to get the third cohort kind of built up. I would love to have some involvement from the people who have been in previous ones as well, because they've been really helpful with steering us in a good direction. We'll get the Scratch expansion and any remaining nodes deployed in an in-person session in the spring. We're still working on getting the exact details of that schedule, but we'll be making announcements out through the RMAC community around all of this here in the coming weeks. Students from all RMAC member institutions are going to be welcome to participate. We do prefer undergraduate students, but we do have a couple of graduate students. We made a determination it wasn't a hard line, even if we really like the benefit of people who were that early on in their career and learning stuff. And as I mentioned, we're compiling the educational material into a shareable form for use and increasing opportunities in HPC. So I think all of this becomes kind of, in summary, a really good opportunity for the students who are involved. We have gotten, I think, universally positive responses. We've had, I think we're going to have some more interest. I know we had a good round of interest when we did the previous recruiting round. I expect it to happen again. We'll be doing some direct outreach, and I think it's been an exciting program. It's been beneficial to RMAC, and it's been beneficial to the individual students involved. So that is the spotlight we wanted to shine on this effort. I'm pretty excited to have been a part of it. It's been very rewarding, and I think the students have said the same. So there we go. I'll return it back to Shelley.
And I think we just have one or two more slides here to wrap it up, because I know we're running out of time. So we have stakeholder reviews. We run an agile process on our team. Anybody's welcome to participate in those. We have our RMAC symposium that's supposed to say 2025, but it'll be here in Boulder, May 20th to the 22nd. The next one will be in well, we don't know exactly where the next one will be, but it probably won't be in Boulder. That artificial intelligence workshop through NAIR that I mentioned, and then you can always check the events pages listed there for ongoing events. I think I'm going to skip the looking ahead just because I'm pretty sure we're running out of time here. All this to say is that we're looking at continuing to grow our systems, grow into secure compute. And, AI is really moving, is driving a lot of things. And so there's a lot that we are doing with that. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And thank you.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank the speaker and thank everybody for listening to the talk. Have a great time. Oh,
I think there's
more questions. Oh, then
I have a question online really quick from Helen Kershaw. If you can share this information, does having CUI data make you a higher profile target for cyber attacks?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that it makes us any more high profile than anyone else. I mean, if the question is just having the data, I don't know that it does. I mean, I think it's, but I'm not a cybersecurity professional. They may have a totally different answer to that. So I think if we don't do it right, then we will be, people might hear about it and we'll be subject to more attacks. But to be fair, it's not necessarily a thing that we're advertising all over the place either. But I think, it's fairly expected that universities have QE data that they're managing in some capacity. It might not be research, it might be student data and all of that. So I don't know that our participation in the research component adds to that.
I have a question here.
Yeah, sure. I'll ask a quick question. I guess maybe this is more for Craig, but either of you. So for the student cohorts, is the intention to always tie that to like a hardware deployment, or has that just sort of been coincidental so far?
I don't think I would say yes to either of those necessarily. The first time around, it was definitely planned. The hardware component is a really important way of bringing that kind of direct educational experience. Whether that is required every time that we are to do one of these, that I am not totally sure. I'd be curious your thoughts on this, having written the grant.
Well, let me put it into context. This was part of a grant that we had. And so when we wrote the grant, it was directly connected to the hardware deployments. The grant's going to end next year. So theoretically, the money for the student participation ends. So, I mean, yes, we've tied it into the hardware deployment. If we wanted to continue this in some fashion, I don't know that it would need to be that way. But the problem is the grant's going to end soon. So.
I was curious if you could speak more to your own perspective on the ongoing and future directions of like the NAIR pilot program and ways in which that ties both into, like educating future workforce engages in AI work, as well as, how institutions like NCAR and CU and others across the Access ecosystem are contributing to that, maybe specifically for us, like how do you see maybe NCAR contributing to NAIR in a meaningful way?
Yeah, so I might not be the best one to answer NCAR's, but I can take a stab at it. I don't know if Dave's around and wants to chime in, but in terms of the future directions of NAIR and AI, I mean, a little bit we're guessing. We've had some. We're about to have a leadership change and whatnot, and so that always is a question about, projects that are in flight and supported by federal funds, what that will mean. But again, with the high-profile support and the bipartisan support, I'm very confident, and just all the interest, that NAIR is going to roll into an implementation project. It was, when the executive order came in, it was a 2-year project, and we just wrapped up year 1, so year 2 will end. What we're looking at in this last year is, we've been refining some of the processes in terms of getting people on the systems and, matching them to the right resource. And that's an ongoing thing. But we're also, now that we have more users online, they've been running since, I think the first call went out for NAIR in like March last year. So it's been like roughly 6-7 months. And now we're able to get a real look at what the users are doing and what their pain points might be. So, I mean, for the pilot, the next steps are really going to be refining that process and then getting this information out as broadly as possible. In terms of, NCAR's involvement and what that could look like, I think Thomas said that you all were contributing data sets. I think that could be a component. I don't want to say that you guys could contribute resources without, having any authority on that matter. But that's, of course, a place where you all could contribute would be cycles on your systems. If anybody here is an AI expert and they want to help with teaching some things, we're let me know, because we're always looking for people. But I mean, the other thing, and the thing that we're trying to do at CU, is really encourage our researchers to apply to those open calls, because they get some elevated access to be able to do the research that they want to do. And then you had an education question. Was that just?
Theme of the talk being education in terms of like, building that future workforce, if that's also a frame
Yeah.
of mind you're thinking about in terms of NAIR. But
Yeah, so one of the things that I spent a lot of time thinking about when thinking about the user experience is not just how can we get, researchers to be doing the best thing that they can, but to me that democratization component is really about educating the communities to, grow the workforce. And some of the things we've been talking about are, when we have this workshop, which again, I don't want to make any commitments because we haven't, fully defined anything, but hopefully we would have industry partners there that are part of NAIR. And what can we do in terms of, having conversations about career opportunities? What can we do to make sure that people have enough of a training to be able to start diving into this and get into the tech, the AI tech field even more. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here, and a lot of things that I think we'd love to all tackle as part of NAIR.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any more online questions anyway. So for this time, yes, thank you again for coming. And yes, have a great time.